When 3 employees of Looking Glass Studios left to found their own company, they wanted to make a game like Looking Glass's System Shock. But to their own surprise, EA liked their ideas enough to give them the license to that very game. And so the guys and their new studio, Irrational, got to make System Shock 2, a game that has gone on to be one of the most legendary and influential games in history. After such a triumph with their first game, they excitedly began work on their next titles. Sadly, their next 2 games would never see the light of day. Before System Shock 2 had released, Looking Glass was already so impressed with Irrational that they asked them to develop another game for them. Irrational agreed and started work on Deep Cover, a modern-day stealth game. Sadly, Looking Glass's financial woes had advanced to the point where they couldn't even pay Irrational for the work they were doing. Irrational was forced to pull out of the project, which was canceled shortly before Looking Glass went out of business in 2000. But while Looking Glass was imploding, Irrational was expanding. In 1999, the company opened a brand new studio in Australia, Irrational Canberra. The new site was headed by Irrational co-founder Jonathan Che, a native Aussie himself. With 2 different studios, the company started work on 2 different games. The Boston crew got to work on their first console game, The Lost, and the Canberra crew began work on a new PC title, Freedom Force. The Lost was an ambitious survival horror game based on Dante's Inferno and set in the modern day. Despite a strong showing at E3 and great expectations from the makers of System Shock 2, Irrational decided to switch game engines halfway through production, a direct break from their rule to design within the boundaries of their current technology. Despite, or perhaps because of this break from their principle, the game had numerous production problems. The publisher, Crave Entertainment, finally severed ties with Irrational and continued work on the project independently. Years went by, but eventually Crave released a heavily modified version of the game in India called Agni, Queen of Darkness in 2008. Irrational had now spent time and money on 2 games that they would never see revenue from. With only 1 other game in development, they needed it to release on time and sell like crazy in order to survive as a company. Fortunately for them, in 2002, Freedom Force did exactly that.
I don't know what will come from all of this, but I must use these new powers to help my country fight her enemies within and without. Those Reds might have killed Frank Styles, but they're about to meet a Minuteman.
The title merged some basic RPG elements to a sound real-time tactics game in a fun, vibrant world lovingly based on old-school comic books. It was a stark contrast to the more adult-themed games they had released, and not released. But like those games, Irrational paid special attention to the game's atmosphere, the feeling evoked by the art design and overall presentation. The title starts the player off with one superhero, the patriotic Minuteman, who then goes forth to recruit more heroes in his never-ending quest to fight bad guys. It was praised by critics for having a focused, engaging mission structure that never veered away from the elements that made the game work. The game's great reviews led to great sales, and Irrational could finally breathe a sigh of relief.
Well done, team, and thank you, Alchemist. It wouldn't have been possible without you.
And their hard work paid off in other ways, drawing the attention of publisher Vivendi. Vivendi owned the rights to the Tribes series of video games, but after the poorly received Tribes 2, developer and creator Dynamix had gone out of business. Vivendi surprised the gaming world when they picked Irrational to develop a new entry. While System Shock 2 was a legendary shooter that included multiplayer co-op, Irrational had never made a competitive multiplayer game before. But Irrational accepted the challenge not only to make their first competitive game, but also to create a story-driven single-player campaign for the first time in the series. When Tribes Vengeance released in October 2004, critics lauded it for enhancing and improving the game's core gameplay mechanics, which had stagnated in earlier entries. The story mode was also cited as unexpectedly good. It It was a sweeping sci-fi epic involving multiple characters over 2 generations, but somehow never got bogged down. As a total package, it was considered a fine return to form for a once great franchise. Sadly, even with the praise, the heavy competition from Unreal Tournament 2004 and Half-Life 2 meant that the game's sales weren't as stellar. As such, Vivendi announced that Vengeance would be the last game in the Tribe series. Not long afterwards, Irrational released Freedom Force vs. the Third Reich in March 2005. For this title, the company decided to play it safe, keeping the style and gameplay largely unchanged, except for an obligatory graphical update. It remained a family-friendly superhero adventure and proved to be another hit title. After a few rough years of unreleased titles, the studio was now on a roll. As they looked to their next game, publisher Vivendi reached out to them again with an offer to work on a different franchise. And so, a studio that had become famous for science fiction and superheroes would finally enter the real world. Tune in next time to see how Irrational went realistic before diving beneath the sea.
The bomb has been planted!